Well, thank you very much. I'm conscious it's the end of a very long day of discussion, so I think Annalise always puts me on right at the end to make sure that I stay brief, and because you've got drinks and everything to go to, there's just been so much inspiring material, and Betty, again, thank you for all that you've done and do. And Annalise actually asked me to speak on the future of capitalism, philanthrocapitalism, and various other things, which would keep us here for a very long time if I really got into that topic. So all I really want to do is to say very briefly that, firstly, we're approaching the 5th anniversary this September of the collapse of Lehman Brothers, an event that I really believed, highlighted that our system of capitalism was, although at its best, incredibly innovative and producing tremendous benefits for society and lifting many millions of people out of poverty, but it had, at its worst, was deeply flawed and needed to be given a real overhaul for the 21st century. In particular, I think that Lehman Brothers sort of indicated the extent to which our system had become incredibly short-term in its orientation and the metrics that we used to judge whether it was going in the right direction or not, and also that people throughout the system were incredibly siloed, that people tended not to think much beyond what was in front of them on their own desk and their own screen. They didn't tend to see themselves in their broader context and to think through their broader responsibilities and opportunities. And I was fairly confident, and a lot of people said it at the time, that we would really overhaul the system and improve capitalism a great deal. And I guess my point that I would want to make on that subject is that 5 years on, I feel we've not really done that at all. That I don't think our system, there has been a lot of regulation, and there's been a lot of people have lost their jobs, although perhaps not anywhere near enough. But fundamentally, the system is pretty much as it was, and the flaws that were there before are, if anything, deeper than they were before. And so the first challenge I would throw out to you is all of us in our different ways are involved in the system that produces wealth and that looks after our savings and invests them for the long term and channels capital to wherever it's supposed to be used most effectively. And all of us should be thinking through how do we improve that system, and can we have more of a conversation that really looks at the long-term challenges that we face to get the system right, because at the moment it's really a mess, I think, and people are not in many ways being able to fulfill their potential and the system's potential to really make a difference. Secondly, it's also coming up to 5 years since the publication of the book I wrote with Michael Green called Philanthrocapitalism, How Giving Can Save the World. And I have to say that a week after Lehman Brothers was not the moment to launch a book on philanthropy and or on on giving in general or on purpose, or anything with the word capitalism in it, even attached to a word like philanthropy. In terms of at least getting a lot of good media and good coverage at the time. But it was, I think, the right time to launch the book because we were really reporting on a movement that I think has become more necessary and in fact has become much stronger since 2008, which is this movement that is bringing together the best of business with the best of the social change movement, of activism, of non-profits, of philanthropy, around this question of how do we really achieve massive progress on a variety of fronts. How do we make sure that our capitalist system does actually serve the better interest of humanity? How do we actually, those of us that are really committed to trying to make the world a better place, how do we leverage the rest of the system in support of the goals that we're pursuing? And I think what we've started, 2 points I want to make about that. Firstly, that in the book, Michael Green and I talk a bit about how we're seeing this emerging ecosystem that brings capital, philanthropy capital, towards the leverage points that are there, whether they be tipping points or bottlenecks or points in the system where you can really have a disproportionate impact, and that the real question that anyone engaged in philanthropy should be asking is, where can I achieve maximum impact through leverage? And that ecosystem clearly has moved enormously over the last 5 years. That what now exists is a system globally of people with capital and intermediaries looking to find people with great ideas and to get the capital and mentoring to those people as quickly as possible. It's not a perfect system, and it's still not as smooth as, say, you see in the world of venture capital, where you see a business idea get the investment and the mentorship it needs and the support it needs to grow quickly into a Google or a Twitter or a Facebook. But we're getting much closer to that. I could have a long conversation about what we need to do to complete that process, but I think now anyone that has a good idea for social change is in the best position they've ever been to get the support to turn that idea into massive change. And so this is a great opportunity for a lot of people, and to work in that system is, I think, going to be very exciting over the next few years. Secondly, people have said, well, one of the themes that came through in philanthrocapitalism, although it wasn't what we were really focusing on in the book explicitly, was this whole partnership approach that you referred to in terms of the Shell Foundation and so forth, that business, non-profits, government are all working increasingly together around social change. And people have said to me, well, what's the format, what's the model of government, what's the model of social change activism going to be in the 21st century? And the phrase that I've found myself using more and more is that the posse is the form that we should think about, which is, I guess, a bit inspired by Westerns, where there's some problem facing the town, and the sheriff rounds up a few people that have the requisite skills, and they ride out together to tackle the problem. But it actually goes back, the whole history of posses and so forth goes back to community governance in the early 11th and 12th century and so forth. It's a long and honourable tradition. But the whole basic idea is that people who have other things that they're doing with their lives regularly, when there's a particular problem, they bring together this sort of, what I also call coalitions of the positive, people who just focus together on that problem, and then once the problem's been solved, they go back to doing whatever they want to do, or they move on to another problem. But it avoids this sort of very rigid structure that we often see in the past. And so one thing that I've been thinking a lot about for myself is, who's in my posse, whose posse am I a member of? And whenever there's a problem I'm trying to address, I would sort of ask that question: who do I know in my network that's really got the skills that would work around that problem? Can I bring them together in an effective way? Particularly just focus. It doesn't need to be for any other problem just on that issue. Let's get together, let's convene, let's all figure about who's in our posse, what is that network. And I just want to sort of encourage you to do the same. So it's been a very helpful metaphor to me. And I just wanted, in finishing, just to talk about 3 or 4 ideas that I've been involved in the last couple of years that have come out of that posse thinking. One is, I'm based in New York normally, and get very involved in what's called UN Week or Clinton Global Initiative Week in late September. And it became very clear. I mean, I was doing interviews up at on stage with some of the people who came to town that week, world leaders of all sorts of kind. And it was very clear that they weren't really reaching out to the outside world. So with the 92nd Street Y, which is a big community centre that holds a lot of public meetings and debates and things, we basically hooked up with Mashable, who I knew some people at, and various other people to create something called the Social Good Summit, which was all about engaging the outside world in what was essentially an inward-looking event in New York. I was just sort of involved in stage. Other people really took the lead on that whole initiative, and this is now being. Last year was 100+ countries were involved, holding meetings. The same thing is going to be done around the G8 summit with something called G Everyone, which hopefully will get some kind of presentation to the actual G8 summit itself. will obviously not be the finished article by any stretch of the imagination. How you actually represent the voice of the public of the world in an event like that is clearly a massively difficult and complex topic, but it's just a start. And I think there is potential to do all those sorts of things. And Henry Timms at 92nd Street Y is a Brit who's in New York doing a lot of that stuff, and I'm happy to be in his posse on those issues. Another issue is something called Giving Tuesday, which was a campaign that he and I helped launch last year, which is really saying, let's have a day where we celebrate giving across America, because that, at the end of the last month of the year is known as the giving season in America, as well as the shopping season. The shopping season has a lot of opening days, days when they celebrate shopping immediately after Thanksgiving, but there was nothing to really celebrate at the start of the giving season, so we got a bunch of friends together who were involved in social media around and in charities and so forth, and just started using this hashtag Giving Tuesday and encouraging people to tweet what they cared about and what they gave to, whether it be time or money. And in a matter of weeks, 2,700 organisations were signed up. We ended up getting President Clinton and the White House to tweet. And we reckon on the day it increased online giving by about 70%, and subsequently really good over the rest of the year. So and what the plan now is for that to go hopefully to start going global. And so I know there's some interest here in the UK in doing it, Mexico, Colombia, Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, all sorts of places. Randomly, this is where Twitter creates this very interesting posse effect, that all sorts of people you haven't even met suddenly start being inside your network and may be able to deal with things. So that initiative is very exciting. And the final one is that one of the issues that I've been very concerned about, and a lot of people have been very concerned about coming out of the financial crisis, has been that we just don't really measure how our society is performing, whether we're going in the right direction at all well. And the traditional measures of GDP, I think we all now are very clear, are very limited. That all those years where we saw GDP going up, and we thought, yeah, we're getting better off. I think many of us doubted whether we were really getting as better off as a society as the GDP numbers seem to suggest. But we now know that, in fact, that was probably a misleading indicator, much as when Nick Leeson's profits went up at Barings. That was a pretty misleading indicator about whether Barings was heading in the right direction. And so we need other measures of what we're doing. And coming out of a network I was involved in at the World Economic Forum around social innovation and philanthropy, we created the idea that there ought to be something called a social progress index, which really ranks countries according to about 52 different measures of social progress, which probably are quite controversial, which ones we included and which we didn't. But to try and change the debate, and if you look at the Human Development Index, which is an early attempt to do some of this, it's really heavily highly correlated with GDP. And so this is an attempt to step away and actually sort of say, just look at the social measures of progress, and then you can look at which countries maybe are outperforming or underperforming relative to their GDP, and therefore ask questions about why that is. We launched that at Oxford at the Skoll Forum about a month ago. Michael Porter, the Harvard Business School professor, is very much taking the lead on that. And again, the ask on all these different initiatives is for your engagement, if at all possible. And with the Social Progress Index, we really want to generate a debate. We very much recognise the first iteration of the index is very basic and a first attempt, and we want to basically crowdsource where it goes from here by getting other people to comment about whether we've chosen the right measures, to partner with us in doing research about why some of the results that have turned up have actually happened. And so I would invite you all to look at the Social Progress Index, easily found by Googling, and equally to contact the people running that. Michael Green, my co-author of Philanthrocapitalism, is really taking the lead in the administration of that. And likewise with Giving Tuesday or any of these other initiatives. But really to finish by saying, look at your own posse, think about who's in it and what problems together you might be able to solve by riding out into the sunset. So thank you very much.